Hi, I'm Patrick Ritter with Core Planning, and my unexpected hobby is fly fishing for rough fish species.
Welcome to Unexpected Hobbies of Financial Advisors, the podcast where we interview fellow financial advisors about their pursuits and pastimes beyond their professional persona, some of which may be surprising to their colleagues and clients. We're interested in what makes them tick and how their unexpected hobbies might or might not relate to their everyday lives. Here's our discussion with this week's guest. Welcome to the Unexpected Hobbies of Financial Advisors podcast. I'm Brian Wright with Fiduciary CFO, and alongside me, my partner in podcasting, Joshua Walker.
It's good to be back. I spent some time podcasting remotely, but it's nice to be sitting at the same table again.
Yeah, it's nice to not have to edit 3 pictures. We can go back to editing 2, making it as easy on me in post-production as possible.
Good.
Very good. All right, well, today we have an interesting hobby.
Well, that remains to be seen.
Well, I think it's interesting. I didn't know immediately what it was. We talked before we went
Same.
on. Like I didn't know what it was, and you had to fill me in a little bit, but we're about to be filled in a lot of it. So we have Patrick here talking about fly fishing for rough fish. Rough fish species, right? Rough fish. And so welcome, Patrick. Thanks for coming on and telling us about your unexpected hobby.
Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it. I could talk about this for far more time than you're giving me today. So,
It's the beauty about hobbies is people. It's like asking people about their kids. They'll go on and on and on, and that's why we have fun doing this.
Except you've been invited to do so this time, and we're happy to hear it.
Yes.
the term nerd used to be something that was derogatory. Now it's just something you're passionate about. So, absolutely in that category myself.
So how did you get into this, and how long have you been doing it?
Yeah, I've always fished my entire life, but I would say in the late 20 teens, 2017, I had one job gap that gave me a good month to go fish as much as I wanted. And it was that pre-retirement kind of spotlight moment that I thought, man, this is what I will do someday when I'm older. And instead thought, I want to do more of this now. And so I did a lot of fishing around rivers and other, I would call overlooked places where there's a lot of fish, but it's not necessarily scenic or beautiful. And so I did a lot of that fishing. And then after a while, I started to pick up, fly fishing solely for the reason I could catch carp, because carp are I think one of the best. They're non-game fish, but they are so much fun to catch. And so I wanted to try to catch one on a fly rod. They got me all into this whole world of fly fishing for non-game fish species. And so one thing that makes it different, I think, is that a lot of times you're fishing for predatory fish. So bass, trout, they're out there looking for other things to eat regularly, whereas a lot of these species are scavengers. So you have to really convince them to take a fly, which can sometimes be a challenge. So
As though fishing wasn't hard enough already, you're going to go the extra mile to put yourself in an undesirable location and then make it extra challenging.
yeah, you have to be good with rejection. So I get rejection a whole lot more fishing than I do the rest of my life. So
You can't just tell yourself there's no fish here, because you know there's fish there. They're just not wanting what you're putting out there.
and that's the best part of fly fishing. You can see them. It's a visual game too. So, oh yeah, like I said, we can go on and on. So you'll probably have to cut me off at points.
Okay, so you said you grew up doing it. Was that fly fishing or angling? How old were you when you first had a rod in your hand?
Oh, like in my early years, probably like 5 or 6 years old. I remember I lived luckily in a suburban part of North St. Louis, but I had access to lakes all around me. I lived right next to a pasture with horses and stuff, so it wasn't at all a suburban feeling place. But anyway, I used to go fish with my friends in grade school. My dad and my uncles all taught me how to fish. So I didn't get into fly fishing until I was an adult. Even though I had a rod when I was 15, I just never used it. It takes a lot of work to get good at it. So I just never put the time in until I was older. So
Yeah. Brian mentioned that I'm a fisherman, and I've never, ever done fly fishing. Only ever angling, whether from a boat or from the land. But I'm hoping to learn a lot as well. And okay, so then when you were growing up, were you primarily catch and release, or were you catching your dinner, or a bit of both?
mostly catch and release. Yeah. I don't know that I've always been, had a super ethical reason for it. I think just out of convenience. So I just kind of like to be able to catch fish again. So I throw them back out there and have reason to come back. So
Yeah, like the dog that catches the car. What am I supposed to do with this thing now? I'll throw it back and do it again.
Right. Right.
Pretty
Okay.
much.
And so, what makes a fish undesirable? And yeah, what puts a fish in this category? And is that a category that's stable over time?
I think like a lot of things in life, I think it's perception, right? So somewhere along the line, somebody's dad taught them that these are not fish you keep. These are fish that you throw on the shoreline, you let them die, and you don't even return them to the water. And so I don't understand where that came from, but I think, especially in the world of fly fishing, there's a lot more. I don't want to say it has a pedigree of elitism, but sometimes fly fishing, it's definitely kind of exclusive in terms of some of the places you go to and maybe the equipment you use and all those type of things. And I think the idea of fly fishing for fish that nobody wants to begin with, you have it's kind of that blue ocean idea, right? That there's all this opportunity out there. Everybody spend their time in the Red Sea. I'm going to fish the blue ocean. I'm going to get as many opportunities as I can out there. So, rough fish or non-game fish, however you want to word it, is definitely an opportunity because they're overlooked. Nobody's fishing for them. So,
Sure. And will you do any eating now, or is it exclusively? I mean, like, is it the sort of fish that, well, this is inedible and that's why people don't want them?
I don't. I've heard a variety of things. Most of the time, it's where I fish. I know where I fish at is not really. I wouldn't want to eat anything there. So, some of the places I've gone to, yeah. I mean, I can smell the water. I can get an idea that this is probably not a good site. There's also the stream team does tests every year, so you can always look and see what were the counts for bacteria and other things in the waters you're fishing. So, those all tell you not to keep anything too.
So
But
it sounds like you're fishing in rivers, is what it sounds
yeah,
like.
a lot of tributaries of the Missouri and Mississippi around where I live. So I grew up right by the confluence of those two rivers, and so there's endless opportunity around where I live. It's just a matter of how many weeds you want to go through, or how many unsafe neighborhoods, or how many nasty water sources do you want to pursue to find these fish. So
Oh, yeah. So you're doing this not just out in a state park someplace, but anywhere that there's water and critters in the water, you're willing to take your rod and fish in some unexpected locations then.
yeah, I would say some of my favorites have really been a lot of like highway overpasses. So there's creeks that you see when you're driving by and nobody bothers to even say, are there fish in there? So those have been some of my favorite spots just to start there and then walk on down along the shoreline or the creek from there. So that's been one of my favorite spots. There's some other spots too. I think if I describe one of my favorites, I'll give it away in the St. Louis area, but it's a very unique body of water that runs right through the center. That is a mixed juice resource. So there's some spots have sewage, some spots have just drainage, and so when it rains a lot, lots of fish show up there. So we go catch them while they're there. So
Okay. So when you say mixed use, it's not like you're dealing with tubers and canoe people coming down the sewage creek. It's
just a
yeah.
matter of mixed water sources that are there. So
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. That makes more sense. And there are a lot of overpasses. You don't often see people either over or here in Indianapolis, the White River, Cicero Creek, none of that. I haven't ever noticed anybody taking advantage of the opportunities.
And
No.
another one too would be overflow ponds. So those bodies of water next to creeks or rivers that get flooded, they get reloaded with new fish every spring and in the fall sometimes. So those are great places too. So
Sure. I guess with two incredibly major rivers nearby, there's going to be a fair amount of opportunities for flooding and then back and flooding and back. And
yeah, yep,
yeah.
absolutely. It's a lot of
Okay.
fun.
Now, is this something that you do with other people that have gotten into it, or are you out on your own?
Yeah, I would say I do most of it on my own, but I do have a few friends that like to do this also. So I do try to meet up and do that together when we can. So
And the uncles and cousins who taught you to fish, the right way, are they aghast at what you're doing now? The black sheep of the family doing this crazy stuff, or have you
some of them
brought them to the
probably
dark side?
yeah, some of them probably wouldn't join me for that. I've talked about it with several. I even have a relative who's a fly fishing guide, and I can't convince him to go with me somewhere, the places that I go to. So, but I've been able to go with him on some rivers around here, though. So,
So you've talked about St. Louis area. If you were to travel to a conference or something, is this the sort of thing where you would take a rod and reel, check it, and find another mixed use overpass someplace in Denver or something?
you know what? I haven't done that yet. I've definitely taken it on personal trips that weren't, I didn't intend to do any fishing, but I still brought my rod with me, and those have been some of my most unexpected and fun adventures for sure. So, I did go to. People wouldn't believe this story, but I did go to Hilton Head for a vacation, and I did bring my rod with me. And we caught a variety of fish, but the last day I was there, right by this tennis court, there was a pond, and there was a tarpon in there. And because it's so close to the ocean, there was some inlet that this tarpon got in there, and you would never think a tarpon was there, much less one that big. And like I said, people think it's a tall tale. I lived it. I saw it. I spent an hour trying to catch it over and over again. Never did. But anyway,
Oh.
I hooked it and it spit it out. So that was that.
That story ended with a thud. I thought we were going someplace different. Okay. Okay. Interesting. All right. And so, are there limits to the time of year? It's here currently the second week of February. I imagine some fishing you can't do. Well, hang on. Do you do ice fishing, or is it strictly when the surface is clear?
Yeah, I haven't yet. No. So
Okay.
mostly the spring and summer and the fall are the best time. So a lot of these fish species are usually most active in the summertime. So that's pretty much go time. So.
Okay.
So do you choose? Are you going in looking for a certain species? It's like, okay, this cast or this fly that I'm going to use, like I want to catch a carp. And you go in with that attitude, it's just like I'm going to put this piece of bubblicious on the end of this fly and throw it out there and see what jumps on it.
A lot of it's observation. So fly fishing is a pretty visual game. Not always, but most of the time it is. And so going to the spots, usually spots I've been to before, either walking around or being outdoors, and just noticed fish that are either have surface activity going on. So sometimes carp will come up to the surface and they'll do what's called klooping, where their mouths are actually on the surface of the water. So at least you can see that there are fish here. It's just a matter of, can I come back at a time when they are feeding the way I want them to feed, and then can I then pick a fly that's going to represent what they're feeding? And so a lot of times, if it's not, visually seeing them, it's at least I know they're there, and I can. It's a lot more observing. It's more hunting than it is fishing, I would say, most of the time too. So a lot of times you are observing their behavior. You're trying to find a target, and you're pursuing that target with the intent of, can I convince this one to bite? Whereas bass or trout, you might be kind of casting everywhere to find a fish. This is much more targeted. So
So for a fish like a tart or like a carp, which I don't know a lot about, but my at least urban legend I've always heard of carp is they'll eat about anything. Does that make it easier because they'll eat about anything, or does it make it harder because now you have an unlimited possibility of what you could try to catch it with? You got to decide what he's hungry for that day.
yeah, I wish that it was easier because it'd be a heck of a lot more fun. But they're actually one of the most intelligent fish out there, and they're very aware of their surroundings, and so they are much more, I would say, they spook a lot easier. And so a
Hmm.
lot of times how you dress, your posture, the shadows that you're casting while you're walking towards a fish that you want to try to catch, that can just ruin your entire spot. So you can have several of them in one spot. And if you're not watching what you're doing, you're easily going to spook one. And then they'll, at one moment, this big explosion happens and they churn up the water and they're gone. So you have to be very careful because uh, they're very spooky. And also, too, on top of that, they eat a variety of things. They're omnivores, right? They could eat. Sometimes they do eat fish and crawfish, but where I live at, most of the time they're eating just material on the ground. So at the bottom of the creek. So a lot of times it's representing things like you know larvae of other insects or miniature crawfish. Just different types of nymphs, which are just kind of like basically kind of a junior insect that's hasn't yet grown up. So anyway, all those things you try to represent with the flies that you throw. So
And those are all things that would live under the water, so not
yeah,
oxygen breathers, but metabolizing some other way and food for
yep,
fish. Huh.
yep.
Okay. Okay. And you mentioned that carps you enjoyed fishing for because they are so fun. What is it about them that makes them fun, other than them being skittish? And is it like they fight really well, or what is it?
Yeah, they're a challenge for one thing. They get very large, so you can definitely catch a 10-pound carp anytime you're out. Whereas, a bass or a trout fisherman might fish their entire lives to catch a 10-pounder. You can do that this afternoon if you're carp fishing. You can convince one to buy, right? Or to bite, not to buy, to bite. And so after, that's one part. And also too, I mean, they are just like freight trains. I mean, as soon as you hook one, they take you on these runs. A lot of fly fishermen, they don't even get into the backing of their reel. The backing is kind of the line that's behind the fly line itself. and you don't really get into that unless you get a big fish that takes you for a run, right? Carp will do it almost every time you catch one. So that's a thrill to. I would say it varies from other types of fly fishing. So
Is it different kinds of line that get merged together, or is it just the stuff that went out and got wet and the stuff that stayed dry?
yeah, every fly reel has the backing, which is kind of like the base, or it's like the first line that begins to fill up a spool of a fly reel. And then you have the fly line, which connects to the backing. And then from there, you have your leader and then your tippet. And so those are the four components of a fly line. And so very few fishermen even use their reels, much less get into the backing. And so with carp, it's a completely different game. So I went to a resort one time, and I was there for with my kids, and they had these koi carp out there, and so people were throwing leftover biscuits and other stuff from dinner and breakfast out there. And so I had a white egg pattern fly, looks just like a crumb from a biscuit. And I mean, I gave the rod to my, at that time, I think he was probably 8 years old. And as soon as I hooked that fish, I said, "Here you go, you can fight him." And it just went zzz, and just took him out in the middle of this lake. And that was at least a 30-minute ordeal to try to get that fish back in. And he never did get that one back in, but I definitely caught more at that trip. So anyway,
Is this something you've been able to get your kids into that they've learned to enjoy as well?
yeah, the fly fishing not as much. I took them fishing a lot as a kid, and so when they were kids, and so the biggest thing of that is getting them to appreciate time in nature and also having time with them. Really, the time in the car you get together. It's really when you kind of get into their world and figure out what's going on in their world and what's frustrating them. What are they excited about? So
Sure.
that's the other part about fishing that is awesome from a dad's point of view. So.
Yeah, I don't know that I would ever go fishing without my father. It's a thing I do with my dad, and it's our thing, and I'm not going to do it otherwise. But a heck of a lot of fun to do together. But yeah,
That's awesome.
we would typically go out in a boat. Do you ever go out in a boat, or are you strictly structures and shorelines?
Yeah, mostly walking and shoreline. So I am also enjoy fitness and being outdoors a lot. So I do a lot of outdoor workout groups. I could do a whole other episode on that, honestly. But so I've had days where I've gotten 15,000 steps in just fishing. So it's a good way of getting some exercise, and also you're obviously being out in nature. But I don't use boats. I'm also very cheap as a as a financial planner. So I've seen a lot of people lose a lot of money on boats, and I figured if I have a friend that will take me once in a while, awesome. But
Sure. Fellowship and camaraderie.
About waders, will you go out into the water?
sometimes, yes, yeah, I have some boots that I use that kind of go up to my knees, and that covers me for most spots. So if I can find a spot and I seem to get a little more access, I'll use the boots. But the waders I save for like my trips if I go trout fishing or if I go to somewhere in Colorado, I'll get in the water a little more. But
Hmm.
the spots where I'm at, I don't know that I really want to get too adventurous into the water sometimes. So
Right.
Yeah. Whenever we have guests on that have a hobby that involves interacting with some stuff, we always ask them about the gear and the gear creep. So, how many rods do you have? How many reels do you have? Is it a problem in your household that you're constantly acquiring equipment and
it's a problem in my trunk of my car. So I do have that with me. Again, I mentioned like the overpasses, right? So if I see something, I'm going to go give it a try usually. So I have about 10 in my back of my car. So, but I'm not a fancy person. I buy at the most, my most expensive ride and reel combo is $100. So
okay?
so if I break them, something happens, it's not a big deal. So
Sure. That fits in with what we did as well. Especially we would fly, and Dad was, we're going to put these in the custody of United Airlines. How valuable stuff do you want to put in the hold of a CRJ? And sometimes we've ended up re-equipping at Walmart on our way once we get there.
that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So, did your kids get into it enough that they would continue it as they move into adulthood, or is it a wait and see kind of thing?
I hope so. I mean, we'll see. Fly fishing is definitely one of those things that's going to take more practice and patience probably than they have right now. But over time they might. So I know for sure though that they both appreciate the outdoors and being in nature either way. Even if they don't like fishing, they'll go with me for a walk and we'll take the dog or we'll get outside and do stuff. So that's the big thing for me.
Okay, so 4 or 5 minutes ago, you were talking about not spooking the fish, and now you're bringing a dog with you. Those seem incompatible,
I'm not
unless
gonna
you've got a
take
very well trained pup.
No, I don't at all. So no, I don't take her fly fishing with me. No, some people do that. That's really cute to see all the images on social media of people that do that. But not my dog. She's a couch potato dog mostly.
Do you have a social media channel for?
I do. Yeah, I've for my River King Fishing is the name of my blog, right? And so I've done it since 2017. It's a hobby blog. It's not a business, but it's something I've always enjoyed doing. And the whole theme is, fishing for fly fishing for overlooked species and overlooked locations. So it's the same thing I'm talking about today. And so Instagram is where I've kind of made a personal kind of diary of catches, and it's one of those things that I think when I'm someday 95 years old, if I live that long, or 85 years old, and I'm in a nursing home and I can't go anywhere, like I hope I can access these images someday and just remember each one of those fishes, because they all tell a story of an experience that, it means a lot, really. I mean, it may sound silly saying catching fish and throwing them back is a meaningful experience, but it is. It's
Yeah, yeah.
uh,
I made
one
a
of those
real.
ways. Go
I
ahead.
made, yeah, I made a valiant effort to read Die with Zero, and I got like 3 chapters in. But that was one of the things that I did get to, is that when you're old and you can't do anything, and you have the memories and the photographs, that you get to enjoy it all over again. And I
Absolutely.
totally see
Yeah.
how that would fit.
I was going to
And
say,
so
go ahead.
go for it.
I would just say too. I mean, another thing too is I think that being in nature, fly fishing, running, things like that, those experiences that you feel, it's also it's kind of where I find a lot of spirituality in my life too. Also, so even though you can
Yeah,
be part of an organized religion and do church stuff, but when you
amen.
really feel like you're with, a higher power, it's usually in those moments you can feel. So it may sound kind of granola-ish, but that's just how it is. So
No, I get that for sure. Yeah. Talking about your blog, is there a nationwide, or I guess not necessarily nationwide, global movement of people that have caught on to doing what you do? Were you one of the first of your kind that pioneered this?
No, I mean there's some guys. Roughfish.com is one of those pages that's been around for a long time. I think his name is Eric Kolsinski. I think is the guy that created that website. But there's Facebook groups for that as well too, and these guys are like really into varieties of fish and fish identification, and so they've been fishing for a variety of species forever. So and there's been people before that too. There's some really good fly fishing books from even the 50s on carp fishing too. So they have a reputation because people will go to the Bahamas to catch bonefish and have the experience of fly fishing a flat where you can see your fish and visually engage them and catch them. You can do that with carp here in North America on a mud flat that's like a foot deep, and that's one of my favorite spots around here is just a mud flat.
Oh. And yet you
But
can still see them, or at least evidence of their activity.
oh yeah, you can see them. Sometimes they have their backs out of the water. Sometimes they're tailing, which is their heads are down, and then their tails are on the surface of the water. And so they're just feeding off the bottom, and you can see the activity. So you're just a matter of trying to, am I able to get this fly on its dinner plate, so to speak, and make it eat? And so sometimes it will, and a lot of times they don't. So
Yeah.
So I've been fishing for desirable fish and caught an undesirable fish. Does the inverse happen? Like you're going out looking for carp and a real winner catches on, or are the places that you are
Dagnabbit,
fishing?
another walleye.
Yeah, or the places you're fishing, like it's all undesirables. There's no self-respecting fish that would be found in those areas.
yeah, no, there's some places where you'll catch a carp or a crappie or a panfish like a bluegill instead. And so that's called being carp blocked sometimes when that happens, right? So it's not really what your goal was, but you're glad to have something bite that day. So
Yeah.
Sure. Makes for a good photograph. Yeah.
And it's the food is the fly. I keep saying the bait, but the fly you use. I mean, are all of the different rough fish kind of after those? Is there some efficiency in just like I'm going to use this fly because they'll all kind of bite on it, or is it like no, I want carp today, so I'm going to use this very particular carp because I know the carp like this, but some of the others will avoid it.
yeah, I would say that you can find some evergreen patterns. So like a black stonefly nymph is one of those flies that just represents any kind of underwater aquatic insects. And so I've been able to catch drum carp and all kinds of other fish on that fly. That and like maybe some variant of like a woolly bugger or like a leech pattern. some of those are pretty evergreen that you can use them anywhere, and hopefully you'll catch a carp or some other type of fish there. But they are, like I mentioned earlier, they're pretty intelligent fish, and depending on where they live and what they forage on, you have to really switch up your flies pretty dramatically depending on where you're at. Where I'm at is pretty consistent. If I were to go to Lake Michigan, they eat gobies, and those are bait fish. So that's a completely different game than what I'm doing, even though they're carp. I saw somebody this summer, a friend of mine is a fly fishing guide. He shared a video. We had that double cicada hatch basically this summer, right?
Right.
And carp were coming at the top like it was a smallmouth bass taking a topwater lure. So I think sometimes conditions and also where they are and what they're foraging on can make them into completely different fish sometimes.
Where do you source your lures and your flies?
So I do sometimes tie my own. I'm not very good at it. So I tie like maybe 3 or 4 patterns that are kind of my go-tos that I know I'm going to use a lot of. Otherwise, I'll go to T. Hargrove's here in St. Louis. I will always plug that fly shop. It's like a home away from home for men. So you'll go there and there's a wood burning stove. They've got whiskeys lined up. They got people smoking cigars and just talking fly fishing. And it's kind of the ironic part is it's right down the street from this women's kind of boutique retailer. So it's like a perfect stop for a couple to have her go
It's
there.
like
He goes there.
husband daycare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Win. Yes.
In the fly fishing community, what is the gender balance, and has it been drifting over time, or is it still a guys thing?
I think it's still mostly men, but there are definitely a growing contingent of women, and I think it's a great sport. I'd love to see women engage it more for sure. Most of the fly fishing guides I've hired in my life have told me that women are way better at it. They're much quicker to learn. They have fewer bad habits that us men kind of stick to and are hard to undo. So
More patience, probably all the things probably make them way better.
absolutely, yeah. Guys pick up a fly rod and they want to act like it's like a baseball swing, and we're just gonna chuck this thing out there like it's a bait casting lure and a rod, and it requires more finesse than a lot of us are maybe naturally predisposed to, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, I had one on the tip of my tongue, but it'll come back to me. Yeah.
All good.
You mentioned taking your kids out, and is this something that you ever have clients or people that you're working with that say, "Hey, let's go take an afternoon and spend some time together"? That's not talking numbers.
I've had some experiences with people that could become clients eventually, but I'm definitely one of those people where to my own, I would say I could have done better in my career if I was probably a little more uh, forward and asking for business or trying to make business opportunities happen in my life. Instead, I think I value too much, relationships, and I don't want to make them weird by doing that part too. But I have friends too that I do other things with that are clients, and there's no issues at all. So
Yeah.
it's probably my own reservation that hasn't had to happen yet. But I do have in my mind like this dream of like it'd be really cool to take a group of like 5 guys to my uncle has a place and go to his farm pond and just like for the weekend, take them fishing, cook meals with them, hang out, but haven't done that yet. So
Yeah.
it's a great dream, I'd say, for now.
For the future. Yeah. When you go fishing, is it the sort of thing where it's a spur of the moments? You've got the spot, you've got your car, you got the times, and you throw a line in, or is it hey, I'm going to go out and I'm going to be gone for 6 hours?
So I would say definitely when I really got back into fishing the most was when my kids were younger, and back then an hour to 2 hours was the most you could get, right? Because you
Yeah.
have a lot of responsibilities at home and you don't want to upset things. So as they've gotten older, they're definitely like, hey, whatever, Dad. Like, I'm doing my thing, you do your thing. So if I'm gone for 4 hours, most of the time I'll check in with them on the phone, but most of the time they're good. If they're out seeing their girlfriend or they're working or they're doing something else, they're not worried about me. So, but most of the time, I usually the night before I'll have a game plan of what I want to do, and I'll have a backup too. Most of the time, I'm not driving more than probably half hour anywhere to go fishing. So most
How
of them
does
are 10 to 15 minutes away.
how does it? What's your relationship with like the rain? If the fish good, bad,
It's probably
Not
not
your
a good
thing?
not a good thing usually. I would say the overpasses, right? Again, those are places that, as long as the water levels are not rising too fast, those can sometimes give you cover and allow you to catch some fish. But those are usually better when you're fishing for your predatory species like your bass or your crappie, because they're taking advantage of a cloudy sky and rain more so than a scavenger fish would probably.
Okay. And darkness or strictly while the sun's up?
Yeah, strictly while the sun's up. It's almost entirely a visual game. Fly fishing is so. I've not tried it at night very much. There are people that go fly fishing for like brown trout at night on the rivers. And, like that is not really that is an awesome idea that is successful for some people, but otherwise, fly fishing is pretty much a daylight thing. So.
And if it's so visually driven, is there ever any olfactory enticement that you'll add to the end of the line, or is it strictly, or would you consider that not fair play?
I haven't done that yet, but I've definitely heard of folks that will fly fish for carp, for example, and they're very tough to convince, right? I mean, when I first started fly fishing, I think it was 8 to 10 weeks before I caught my first carp.
Yeah.
And that was going probably 2 or 3 times a week, just getting rejected over and over again. And
Oh,
most of it was my own casting ability, but also too, in terms of the presentation, like they really are pretty picky, and getting them to bite is a pretty much a challenging endeavor. So, but I have heard of folks that will use corn pattern flies, and then you can dip them in like basically the juice from canned corn, and then it gives them that flavor if they really. But that would be like if you are fishing for a tailing carp and there's a mud cloud and they're not as visually picky and they can pick up on the scent, they might do that. I've not done it yet. I'm not saying I'm above ever doing it. I just haven't tried it yet.
yeah. I always tell myself I'm not going to bribe the dog, but then something needs to happen. And where's the peanut butter?
Absolutely, especially when you got to give them those vet pills, man. Whatever it takes.
Yeah, they're
So.
not going to eat themselves. Yeah.
So you,
So,
so you talk about like being in these undesirable locations under like overpasses and things like that, and you have your eyes on the water looking for movement. Tell you what, if I'm down in that area, my eyes are on my feet and what I'm about to step on or step around or step over. What talk to us about what other sort of wildlife you encounter when you're in the in the water line in these undesirable
are you
locations?
going to try to get him to talk about leeches? We had a guy on talking about hiking, and eventually we were talking about leeches, and I just could barely keep it together. So please don't go for leeches.
Unless leeches are the answer.
Unless the leeches is the
I would,
answer.
I would be,
Snakes.
for me, it would be snakes. It
Why
would be
does it have to
like,
be snakes?
yeah, why does that have to be snakes all the time? So,
Yeah, I'm surprised I haven't. I heard this a lot from other people in my household before. That why haven't you gotten bit yet? Like you deserve to get bitten after all the time you spent along these waterways and these weeds. I would say in terms of wildlife, sometimes it's people that are, I don't know if they're on meth or if they're on other substances. So, they might be hanging out in the park that you're walking by on the way to the water. So that's sometimes what you come across. I
that's
had
definitely
one.
wildlife. So,
Oh yeah, I
yes,
think
yes.
probably one of my more unique ones is on the Merrimack River here, and this couple. It was maybe 9:30 or 10 o'clock, and they get out there in the river. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting there in the river, and so they're walking out there. The guy steps on something. He cuts his foot open. He's bleeding, and
Mm.
he's yelling at his girlfriend, "Go get me some of those Salem lights and my Milwaukee's best, and get over here." And I mean, just the people that you come across sometimes are just like that's some of the more unknown, I'd say. In nature, I mean, I've obviously come across a lot of deer and other wildlife, but I haven't really felt threatened yet
Yeah.
or in danger yet.
Not
So,
enough to pick up a handgun hobby.
I've had a couple of times where I feel like I should probably be doing that, and I haven't done that yet. So, I did have one time with my son where we both almost got swept away in the current on the Merrimack, a different section. So, I shouldn't say I've never had any risk of being harmed. That was one where I was very grateful to have been working out a lot then, because I know that I would have been able to maintain my core there in the water and hold him and the gear and everything and not get swept away. So
And is this something that has his mother heard this story yet?
I think so, yeah. So it's
Well,
one of those moments where your kid's looking at you and his feet are, in the water going like this, and he's saying, "Don't let me go, don't let me go." So yeah, that's still in my mind. So yeah. Otherwise, I'm pretty conservative guy. I'll
okay.
go on.
Well, pivoting slightly, are there any special positive memories that you'll take with you the rest of your life that don't involve almost losing your children?
Yes, yeah. Let's contrast that one. Yes, I would say I've had two different job gaps in my life. And so I guess one of my lessons taken away from that was that as a kid, I felt like a lot of, I would say there was a lot of judgment of other people, right? If their lives didn't work in this linear pattern, then something's wrong with them, right? And so having job gaps, I could have spent that time really beating myself up and saying, why are you in this spot again? And instead, I really looked at them as little mini opportunities to kind of figure out, what I want to do work wise, and then also, what I want to spend my time doing besides. And so, I would say those opportunities have given me little windows into what retirement could look like. And when I think of retirement now, it's not even being done working. It's like I would like to do fly fishing, guiding on the side, have clients on the side while I'm retired. I'm gonna work till I'm 70 or 75 years old, but I still want to have time to do this stuff too. So, I think those periods of time have been very formative, for me. And so those are my favorites. I don't know that I have a great story to tell you that's like amazing. I could tell all kinds of stories that would just go on forever, but um the main part though just being that life isn't always linear, and you really there's lots of opportunity to figure out what you want to do. I've thought of this before, like wouldn't it be cool if somebody had a business where they worked with people that are planning for retirement, and they do what are called like retirement flights, right? You ever go somewhere and get like a flight of drinks like beers or wines? Maybe they find like three or four things that they get to experiment with while they're in their working years and say, you know what, when I retire, I'm going to volunteer and spend my time on one of these four things that I really honed in on, one of the four options on my flights.
Yeah, we've got a couple pre-retirees that could benefit from a few
Yeah.
things like that. Yeah, it's an interesting way to think about it.
So I feel like those job gaps have kind of given me some of those opportunities that have said, you know what, I want to keep working out outdoors. F3 is a group I'm a part of, so that's one thing that I definitely intend on doing the rest of my living years. Fly fishing's another one. Volunteering and serving in a variety of capacities are going to be one of those. So, but when you're in your working years, I don't know that you always take time to think about what do I really want to do, what's important. So,
Was Gothrop with Rucking that was talking about F3, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, out in
Yeah.
Seattle.
oh yeah,
Okay.
yes, rucking is like amazing exercise. It's perfect.
Especially if you're carrying a sack of fish. So in January, lots of people get into fitness, and you started this before the pandemic. When the pandemic rolled around, was there a spike in interest in the blog and people out getting into fishing because it was an outdoor thing, or is that not? Was fishing not the go-to? People were too entranced with their sourdough.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I would say a lot of interest. At that time, I did have a different format on the blog, and I did have products that I had sold. And just like a lot of retailers, I had shortage. I couldn't maintain, product there. So, and it's just a
Hmm.
matter of just being able to get it. So yeah, a lot of people got interested in it for sure. And there's some really good positives to that. Also, some of the negatives are that with social media, I would think there's a lot more what they call spot burn, right? People just go out there and make this video and say, this great place over here on this intersection right by the Merrimack River and Highway 30. This is a great location. You should come out here and catch fish. And then next weekend, there's 15 people that don't respect the resources the way that you do. And so that's the
Yeah.
part. I think you want to assume the best in people, but then I think when you experience enough of how they treat natural resources, sometimes you're like, I don't know that I want to make that assumption. So
And that phenomenon happens often enough. It's got its own name, spot burn.
yeah, yes. I would say it's something that came out of the pandemic, especially because that's when you saw a lot more social media exposure. So to
Yeah.
fishing.
Yeah. Huh.
I'm
So,
giving you all kinds of jargon this trip or this
Oh yeah,
podcast.
it's good. Yeah.
so I've always associated, fly fishing with like trout or, river fishing and trout. Oh, we're going to go on a trip and go fly fishing, go to Canada or whatever. And
Yeah. Did you catch rainbow or did you catch cutthroat?
right, right. So it's like it hearing your story and how you do this for, the rough fish, does that make you like it seems to me like you have so much more opportunity to hone your craft of like the actual like handling the fly fishing that can you just drop in on those proper fly fishing trips and just kick everybody's butt because you had the opportunity to practice way more
A
than
ringer.
yeah you're the ringer at the in the Colorado trip for
I
trout.
don't know. I have gone fly fishing with friends before that have said, "Man, that cast like that got all the way out there, and that was really accurate, like where the fish was at." So I mean, over the years, as I practiced a lot, yeah, in some ways, yes, but I'm I've been humbled so many times in my life, in a lot of ways, but fly fishing especially, and so. I would never claim to be like, "Hey, I'm better than a bass fisherman or a trout fisherman at any aspect," because I have gone with my trout fishing friends, and they just really embarrassed me before too. So,
Are
so
there competitions for your corner of the fishing world?
I don't. There are sometimes there used to be oh like different Carpalooza. There's different there's some other events too where you would try to get as many species of fish caught on the fly over a
Oh yeah.
weekend or a 24-hour period. So that was taking place like in Southwest Missouri in the last recent years. So I used to be really close to like all those names of events and things. It's been a while now, but yeah. So there are some competitions, but mostly it's for fun and for promotion of you know valuing the resources that we have. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's the big thing I think in all of this is that we have all these great fish. They are fantastic to catch, just like a trout or a bass would be, and they deserve respect too. So
Sure. Sure. We always ask if there's lessons and overlap and some of the ways that you were talking about getting a fish interested seemed like it might have some overlap with our marketing strategies. Am I drawing too close a line?
And dealing with rejection, you've mentioned rejection a couple of times. Like, wow, there's a skill that is helpful as a financial advisor.
yeah, for sure. I'm still working on that part actually. I mean, the fish rejection is much easier to take, I think, than the other form of rejection, but yeah, I would say, one of the things in terms of how I run my practice, I definitely want to work with anyone. So I never want to say that I have a limit and this is my hourly rate. I do have an hourly rate, but I mean, I don't have a minimum of assets. I don't have a flat rate. And anybody below that, I go refer that out. I can work with just about anyone. And so I do have an hourly rate for somebody who just wants like a one time check or a project. I do feel like my flat fees are very reasonable too. So I mean, the bulk of my clientele really are, I would say, middle market, right? So,
Sure. Yeah.
and then I think I have a few folks that are, kind of like the barbell, right? The weights on each end. So,
Yeah.
so there's a mix there. So I like the idea of not overlooking any potential person that needs help because uh, everybody needs help,
Yeah.
especially in our culture for sure.
Yeah. For all the known virtues of niching and specialization, there's a real need for generalists who work with ordinary people doing ordinary things. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. If somebody was interested in getting into this, what would be the right place to start? Is it online and blogs, or is it out in nature? How do you set yourself up for success if you think this might be the hobby of your future?
Yeah, I would say to start with, if you're interested in fly fishing, YouTube has this fantastic series done by Orvis, and it's just called the Orvis Guide to Fly Fishing. It's like probably 5 or 10 hours long, maybe. And but it's mostly trout focused, but they do one episode on carp and they do an episode on bass too. And so it really is great fundamentals about just learning what is fly fishing and all the different ways to fly fish. And then in terms of like fishing for overlooked species, there's so many different people that are into it now. So I would say YouTube is a great resource just to kind of start following some of the people out there that are doing it and learning some of the basics from them. But the biggest part, especially for fishing for more challenging species, would be getting out there and learning how to cast and how do I actually approach and stalk fish without actually scaring them. And a lot of that's just through, you know, trial and error, making mistakes, and then knowing next time not to approach from that angle of the sun, right? Because you're gonna used to a shadow on them, and now that fish is gone. So it's a little bit of both, you know, but I would start there. And then my blog's got some good resources too, riverkingfishing.com. That's just it's a hobby blog. I've got maybe probably 15 or 20 different articles out there that I've done over the years that are about a variety of different topics. I used to write about just all kinds of things I was interested in, and that's just kind of eventually narrowed into this topic of fly fishing for these fish in places that people don't like to go usually.
How did it get that name, River King Fishing?
So my thought at that time was just that fly fishing in overlooked places for overlooked species in overlooked places, you own the river like a king. There's nobody else there, right? So I found myself on the river so many times by myself catching fish and looking around like you're used to fishing at lakes and there's people that give you that stink eye when you catch like the big fish that day, right? And so I was out there some days
I've been
catching.
there many times.
I had times where I was fishing out there and catching 5 and 10 fish, and some of these are so big, and I'd be like, I can't believe nobody else is doing this. Like, where is everybody?
Where is
I
my
don't,
audience?
well, like, I don't need an audience, but just like, who wouldn't want to be doing this, right? So that's kind of where that came from, more or less. It's just you own the water when you go places and fish for fish that people don't like or they overlook. So.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. What sort of stuff? I don't know if you can or want to answer this, but when you were selling stuff, what did you have for sale on the blog?
Oh yes, I mean even now you can go out there and there are items that are listed. So they are just more or less items that, as an affiliate, like I could earn some kind of revenue on. But
Okay, sure. Yeah.
mostly it's flies, waders. It's geared more towards people that are starting out, more so than
Okay.
probably your expert anglers.
So you don't have your kids out in the garage tying flies that you're shilling on the website yet.
I'm not above that. I mean, sometimes they could use a little discipline and structure. So
Plowing money into their Roth IRAs.
1099 income.
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, excellent. All right. And do you see yourself doing this indefinitely forever, grandkids into your twilight years, or is there a shelf life on this, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So I see myself definitely when I'm retired, maybe even before then. I even have on the blog now a listing of like if you ever want to learn how to fly fish, just a couple hour session. I would take somebody and there's a price listed there, but honestly, I don't even care if I would get paid. It's not really about money, but yeah, I definitely intend on doing this probably the rest of my life. So.
And what might happen that would make you stop? Would it be a shoulder injury or core weakness or something with your legs? What would make it different enough for you that it just wasn't fun anymore?
Being assaulted.
Scorpions.
A crackhead.
Maybe I'm just asking for that. I don't know because it
I don't
hasn't
know.
happened
Jeez,
yet.
knock on wood, man.
But yeah, I was gonna say it would have to be some kind of injury, and so that is one of the reasons why, like we mentioned F3 earlier, that's a big part of it, right? Is maintaining that strength for longevity. That's one of the workouts I've led before, with just the intent that I want to be 85 or 90 in the creek someday fishing still. So
Yeah.
and
As
it
long as
doesn't
you can,
happen by accident if you don't take care of yourself.
as long as you can still see and you still are arthritis free enough to work your fingers, then yeah, that could work.
Are there any, dare I say, like bucket list locations? Are there any desirable, undesirable locations that you haven't been that you're looking to do? Like,
There's a few spots I've heard of and I've not gone yet. So I mean, like Lake Michigan I mentioned earlier up in Chicago. There's also a section of river there also in Chicago I've heard about. So I've not done that yet. I do like the nice places too, though. So I mean, I haven't gone yet, but obviously I like to go to. I want to go to Patagonia. I want to go to, different places throughout the world. Italy. There's some great fly fishing places there too. So I get to go to Winter Park often, which is, I feel incredibly grateful that I get to go there fairly often. And the fish aren't big, but it's amazing you can catch these wild stream fish and what looks like inches of, I mean, like just hardly any water there. And the beauty is just out of this world. So I mean, I'm not opposed to beautiful places either. So that's been pretty cool too, to go to some places and catch the conventional things too.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a career changer, and the family business I came out of wasn't always a family business. There were other partners, and company's roots were in Northwest Colorado. So if you find yourself in Steamboat Springs, I can recommend the Elk River and the Yampa River. Those are beautiful places to be.
I have heard some amazing things about that. Absolutely. So on the list still.
Good. And
A long list.
if you find yourself in Indianapolis, the White River is majestic.
And opaque.
It's like both of them here. The Mississippi and the Missouri is, it's chocolate milk. So.
Yeah.
Delicious. Okay. All right. Well, we appreciate having you on here. We've got River King Fishing. If somebody wanted to find you professionally, where would they go to find you when your feet are dry?
Yeah. So Core Planning has a website. It's corepln.com is the website. So that's a big one. Then also I do have a newsletter I do called Wealth Builders Weekly. And so that really just goes to my clients or prospective clients. So it's not a huge number of people, but I take a lot of joy and pleasure and pride in writing that every week. And so that's something that happy to mention as well too, because I enjoy doing that. It's a great deal of fun.
Every week. Some people find that to be a slog after a while, but if you're still enjoying it, that's a really good sign.
It's been a year, and so I've liked it. And I had a whole different theme last year. This year, I switched my theme around. So as long as you keep it fresh, and then also I'm big on visuals, so I've been enjoying incorporating tools like Sora into the newsletter. So I have new random videos that I throw into every post now just for fun. So
Okay.
I would say that's one of the things about fly fishing is the inspiration you can take from it also too. The visuals and I would say the natural beauty encounter. I've applied that throughout all kinds of training purposes, practice management, marketing, content type stuff. So
Says the man
anyway,
sitting in front of a blank white wall.
yes. I did have a picture, but I removed it. It seemed a little too it was too predictable of a picture, so I didn't leave it up.
Okay. Would you photograph and document your successes?
Yeah, so Instagram for River King Fishing, and then also too on Pexels, I have a page too, which is basically just a diary of pictures I've taken, and so I have it titled "Fortunate Bystander of Beauty While Fly Fishing" because that's basically all it is pictures of, and most of it's not fish. It's just like, man, I can't believe I captured that image today when I was out chasing fish. So
Put yourself in the right position, and the light comes in the right way, and all of a sudden it's magical.
yeah. So
Okay, so crossing one episode over the other, a few times back we had Gyotaku, the
Yeah,
guy who would
that's
catch fish and then dab them in charcoal or ink and make the prints. And so if anybody's interested in ways other than photography to document the fish,
There you go.
Gyotaku episodes, I don't know, three or four back, early
Yeah.
January.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's very cool to check that out for sure.
That's a hobby. That's a
I
thing.
know friends that do wood burning too, and those are really amazing images too they make. So
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Well, Patrick, thank you so much for being with us today. We've had a good time talking about this, and look forward to getting back out there with my rod.
Yeah, this is great. We have some retention ponds around here too, so maybe I'll get the kids like it. We always do fishing in Brown County. That's like that's what we do there when we go once a year.
Oh.
And we're like, we need to do this more than just once a year, and then we come back up and we never do it.
Life.
So yeah, life gets in the way.
Watch
So,
out for turtles.
absolutely.
Yes.
And thank you both too. I really appreciate this. Obviously, like I said, we could do this for 5 hours and I have no problem. So
Awesome.
We'll call it here. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Unexpected Hobbies of Financial Advisors is brought to you by Fiduciary CFO, forward-thinking tax and planning solutions for business owners, like RIA firms and their business owner clientele. The opinions of Brian, Joshua, and their guests are for entertainment purposes and should not be construed as legal, tax, financial, or investment advice. You should know better than to take any of this content seriously. Thanks for being a fan of the show. If you were listening and thought to yourself, hey, I know somebody they need to have on the show, you can do something about that. Go to unexpectedhobbies.com/nominate and tell us who they are and what they do that's so interesting and unexpected. If we agree, we'll send them an invitation and we'll hope they say yes. Now it's unexpectedhobbies.com/nominate.